Procedure. What's the procedure, officer? It was a movie in 1996 with Jada Pinkett, Vivica Fox, Queen Latifah, and Kimberly Elise, with appearances by L.A. Law's Blair Underwood and Oliver Stone's Wall Street broker John C. McGinley. In the 90s, stars from the 80s, and a story about when you lost everything and have nothing to lose. So far down that even down looks up. Sisters with an attitude who struck hard times and turned to a life of crime. And like so many similar films of the boys in the hood film genre era and age, from Point Break to Dead Presidents, they decided to begin a whole new career, setting it off by robbing banks. Turn stick-up kid, look what they done did. Got set up for an 8-year bed, claimed to see that their lives were lost. They got cold and their bodies swung back and forth. Now their eyes sang the sad, sad song of how they lived so fast and died so young. So don't push them, because they're close to the edge. They're trying not to lose their heads. Ha 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 ha. It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes you wonder how they keep them going under. Well, it's like a science. And then set it off while Queen Latifah, in the role of Cleo, kind of like Theo, but she's a woman, the tough girl from the cosmos. Cleo, the tough girl, lesbian, decided to go out like Thelma and Louise, because we can't stay in the movies forever and watch these wonderful vicarious adventures. And it was Vivica Fox in the role of Francesca, Frankie Sutton, who ends her rampage of crime, former bank teller, by facing off against Detective Strode, who she had encountered early in the movie after a stick-up in the bank, where evidently she felt that they were accusing her of stealing something, putting a gun to his head to ask him what's the procedure. Four homegirl homies in the South Side LA who took different paths in life in the beginning, and as the shot pans out on the showdown under the street lights of a nighttime city street, a bit of passion-fixated myopia is disrupted by a car lead away reality that Frankie is trapped in an inevitable destiny, surrounded by law enforcement, where the only certain procedure is that she will accept no option or alternative ending to that movie. But in the news at this hour, especially for those standing with the Ukraine, albeit in social distance thousands of miles apart, the world police have apparently been called 911, as it's being reported that a team of experts commissioned by the UN's top human rights body, the Human Rights Council, to look into rights violations in Ukraine, says its initial investigation has turned up evidence of war crimes in the country following Russia's invasion nearly 7 months ago. But what does this mean? Are you even familiar with Procedure 1503? Probably not. Is Vladimir Putin going to be found pimped up lowrider style like Queen Latifah, playing with her suspension, roaring her engine, and cranking up the tunes, getting ready to set it off? Probably not. And some may recall a similar news story months ago when both the Ukrainian president, around the time of primaries, Vladimir Ballad in the Streets, the former comic actor, and Joe Biden's Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, had claimed to have reported war crimes to Interpol and the International Crimes Commission, which was just as effective as the president's plan to end the pandemic by Independence Day in 2018. A pandemic still with us, piling up bodies as many as we had on 9/11 every week, and essentially a forgotten news story. Well, they wouldn't be broadcasting it as early voting begins. Nor has Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State, yet been able to gain full access to the laboratory to find out whether or not the zoonotic evolution did not occur, and in fact a novel coronavirus came from a lab. So first, for those who aren't in a habit of filing complaints under Procedure 1503 to the United Nations, who may not be aware that the old procedure under Procedure 1503, available to anyone in the world who wants to present a complaint about a pattern of violated human rights, hopefully not derogated rights under the preamble, as Pastor Hemmings Jacobs did all the way to the Supreme Court during the smallpox epidemic back in 1903, 1904, 1905 in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Anyone who wants to present a complaint about a pattern of violated human rights is free to utilize, has been revised. Procedure 1503 is like so old school. Go back to the reports right now to the International Crime Commission, or ICC, distinguished from the HCC, which is now the agency for whom Interpol, a name certainly familiar to spy movie fans and aficionados, which serves as their law enforcement arm, or police. So you probably see them, with the Anne Frank sirens in the movies. Interpol. Well, calling it Interpol. It's been a while since that headline news, but try to recall the excitement it had provoked with the hope of galvanizing voters probably to go out and do their duty, especially those not already incited by the call from the former First Lady, Michelle Obama, to vote like democracy depends on it. What happened to that old complaint? If you can still remember it, an old complaint about war crimes, reports of investigators on the ground in the trenches in the war torn Ukraine. Well, have you ever tried to sue, say, the phone company, or Walmart, or the government in a pandemic? Most didn't. And walk down to the traffic court when you wanted to file your complaint to set it all off. Well, that's exactly what happened back then, because the ICC, like most international law authority tribunals, are governed by treaties, just like the Biological Weapons Convention, BWC, that the United Nations had opened for signatures and ratification back in 1971, and that China had to have their attorneys look at, dot all the I's and cross all the T's, didn't sign on until, or deposit accession documents, as they say, until 1984, sometime that Dr. Fauci was coming on board at the NIAID. And just like that phrase that if it's not in the contract, you can't do it, if you don't sign the treaty or deposit accession documents, as diplomats say, you are not therefore bound to its provisions. A very, very Machiavellian idea, that, you are not bound to keep faith with those who have not kept faith with you. Same basic principle. Do unto others before they do unto you. Can Don Buyer make you pay installments on a luxury car you didn't buy? You could try, but legally, no. Well, treaties work the same way. And maybe that experience helped his resume when he became a U.S. ambassador to Switzerland and Liechtenstein, in addition to a $500 million in bundled donation to the Obama administration's campaign president. And to provide empirical evidence, since everyone is following the science these days and want to have the evidence, show me the links, we decided to throw another shrimp on the Barbie and shout off a similar complaint about a pandemic pathogen to the ICC and Interpol that had already claimed over 1 million American lives. American lives, not those over in the Ukraine to be standing with, Americans right here. In fact, to date, about 22,000 just associated with veterans' homes. About as many fatalities as we have right here in Virginia, presenting allegations of crimes against humanity. And as much as Woodrow Wilson, who was actually the stooge of a guy called Frank I Am the Law Hague, big boss guy, big machine in New Jersey. Woodrow Wilson, the Stanton, Virginia hometown boy, who became the 45th governor of New Jersey, may have wanted to believe in a new world order and a League of Nations after the first war to end all wars, to prevent the outbreak of the World War the next time, like the pandemic next time. There is an idea of sovereignty that nation state rather seriously. And in fact, more seriously than most people take their own defense of liberty. They generally do not like a gang of other nations telling them what to do. Big reason why the end of the First World War caused Germany to set it off again in a sequel. One of my favorite stories in terms of international politics is the Eichmann trial, where special ops went into Argentina to grab Adolf Eichmann and bring him all the way to Israel back in 1961. Daring raid conducted, even long before Abbottabad. And he ended up in court. And one of the big problems was that there was an extradition agreement, something that had to be signed on to. And Adolf Eichmann was trying so hard to get away from Nazi Germany and not wanting to be found out that he didn't even let the Argentines know that one day some Israeli special ops might come in, get ready to kick some butt. And so they didn't find it that he had acted, courteously, to let them know. And so they said that, basically made a rule that if you don't let us know that you are using our extradition immunity, then we don't have to honor it. And so they were able to continue on with his trial and eventually hang him. But in politics, for every action, at least in international geopolitics and Newtonian science, we follow science, there is an equal and opposite reaction in consequences and repercussions. So here we go again with war crimes in the Ukraine. And you may want to grab your popcorn as we continue this. This cry or claim of sovereignty we hear very often in politics. And if you go into court in Virginia, you're going to find out that sovereign immunity is not dead in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And you may have seen some advertisements in D.C. on license plates about home rule, self-autonomy, taxation without representation, a reference not back to the Revolutionary War so much, but a reference to their non-voting member in Congress. But probably most residents in D.C. could probably be perfectly happy whether or not a vote is cast in Congress by Eleanor Holmes Norton, Don Myers' good buddy in the Atheist Club in Congress, or Jamie Raskin's Congressional Free Thought Caucus, as he describes it. Because there is a wonderful term in political science for this. The issue is not of salience. It is not a salient issue. Kind of like saline solution, but spelled like way different. A salient issue, not the coffee table issues that you face day to day in the grind. Here's another college phrase from political science, you don't feel a sense of relative deprivation. And a political scientist named Cad Robert Kerr back in 1973 had determined that when that occurs, when people decide to rise up and set it off, that is why men rebel. He had a lot of evolutionary pressure to come to that decision as a professor. After the 1960s, when not only the American Civil Rights Movement had begun to transition or escalate to rioting and looting after the assassinations in the 60s of the Kennedys and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, from civil disobedience and protest marches, but also freedom movements like this were beginning to cause a pandemic outbreak all over the world, very much like we've seen recently with Black Lives Matter, even during a pandemic. And even if individuals might let the government close their business, stop them from going to church, even keep their kids out of school, postpone vacation, going to live exciting lives. When it comes to big government, let's just say, as they do in the vernacular, homies don't play that. And it is what it is. You may have your right to bear arms, but he has a well-established militia, well-regulated militia, and he's going to make sure that he does not suffer loss. even if the cross of Jesus does. Just keeping it real, though. So now the ball is in the court of the United Nations for these war crimes in the Ukraine. And all the way up in New York? Well, no. That may be where the United Nations is, but the Human Rights Council, HRC, is actually located in Geneva. Like your Swiss bank account, if you happen to have one. And where Don Beyer, the member of Congress with the worst roll call voting record, you didn't know that, you're really not an informed voter, because he actually has the worst roll call voting record in Congress, even though he lives the closest to Congress. Second only to non-voting member Eleanor Holmes Norton had served as ambassador under Hillary Clinton in the Barack Obama administration. And as you can see, if you didn't know that Don Beyer wasn't going to cast these roll call votes, your life really didn't change too much, did it? It really didn't affect you. That's kind of the point we're trying to get here. But like the Biological Weapons Convention, it certainly sounds appealing and efficacious to learn that a world government body, because we all want world government and universal healthcare from big government to help us out, even though, I don't know, universal healthcare didn't help us out too much in the pandemic we still have. But you want that big government, some people do, out there to hear your complaints and take your grievances for redress. You know, you may never use it, but it's good to just know that it's there. You know? And according to at least the 22 immutable laws of marketing, and Don Beyer has said that politics is like sales. 22 immutable laws of marketing from two guys, Rice and Trout, weighing in at number 4 after primacy for being first in the market. You don't only remember, the first guy who crossed the Atlantic, or the first guy who went to the moon, or being first after being a category killer, after saturation, to be first in mind is the law of perception, because perception is what? It's reality. It's your reality. You think that ball is going to disappear, and so when the magician says it has disappeared, you believe it. And perception trumps fact. You don't have to be the best, even in politics. It only matters that your customers or voters believe that you are the best, or make it, not until you make it, but because you can. People want to believe in math. People want to believe a lot of things. And there is even a phrase in political science for this phenomenon, and it is called what? Legitimacy. Legitimacy. A thought that even Thomas Jefferson gave some thought to in the Declaration of Independence, when he said that governments are formed amongst men and derive their just powers from what? The consent of the governed. Majority rules. And that's a part of why in democracies the franchise and vote are emphasized. Anybody say they're important? You do your duty. Think Toyota. You ask for it, you got it. And you feel good when you get that for which you ask. But you're not always happy about getting that for which you prayed. So be very careful. So what actually happens when the Human Rights Commission, HRC at the UN, gets involved in war crimes and crimes against humanity? After somebody presents a complaint under the old procedure 1503 by sending the new complaint form to Geneva instead of just getting on the phone and dialing 911, screaming, "Help, stop, give me the police." Well, obviously nothing happened after the investigators went to the Ukraine and reported the war crimes to Interpol, or we wouldn't be now seeing headlines about the new evidence of war crimes going to the United Nations. It's kind of like the big scientific report using the same diagnostic equipment that we used to break the N95, trying to test out substitutes for PPE before a pandemic, a decade before the pandemic. If that had worked, we probably wouldn't have to have new tests to try to do evolving science. But suddenly we found ourselves in a pandemic. Tests were happening all over the place. You try to claim that these non-medical grade respiratory devices were effective at preventing infection. and apparently we found no tests that proved them, but in people's minds, just like with efficacious vaccines, people thought that they worked. But who now we have these reports of war crimes going to the United Nations, and who's standing with Ukraine. Can't wait to watch the Vladimir Putin OJ trial on CNN. Get a Johnny Cochran and a Marcia Clark. It may be as exciting as the last UN trial that probably nobody recalls, where we had, war criminals in Broncos going down the highway being chased by police in slow motion. Do you know why you don't remember it? Did the United Nations convict Adolf Eichmann? No, that was the Attorney General of Israel. Sent out special ops guys to grab Eichmann and bring him there. How about the Nuremberg trials? Really great movie with Greta Garbo coming out of basically Hermitage, Maximilian Schell and James Dean. Well, they certainly contributed in the Nuremberg trial to the body of international law and formed the basis of the 1948 United Nations Genocide Convention. But that was not the United Nations being the judge at that trial, or even the jury either. So this is a little spoiler alert in case your hopes are really, really pinned on something really, really big happening. Well, what to expect from what is now headline news during a contentious midterm election when everyone is standing with Ukraine. Perception is the reality for most. This is why we go to watch magic shows and go to Vegas to try to hit the jackpot. And in politics, if you're ever invited to a poker game and don't know who the sucker is, well, let's just say you've probably been fully vaccinated and boosted. And did anybody ever tell you you look like an intelligent person? My name is Major Mike Webb. By God, I am running U.S. Congress. This year, do the right thing, and we shall make America great again. Honest. Carry on. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
Thunk, I could have had a vaccine.